Well, thanks to the organizers of this really important event and for giving me the chance to um, um, expand a little on this gospel of the beauty of sanctions that Vlad was just talking about. Um, I guess my presentation could be summed up as, yes, the ideal is beautiful. The reality is a bit more messy. Are we here? Right. Great. Okay. So my name is Aage Borchgrevink, and I work with the Norwegian Helsinki Committee, which is a human rights group. And I'll be presenting briefly from a report that we have given the maybe not so beautiful name, but the Russia sanctions as a human rights instrument, violation of export controls regarding war critical goods to Russia. You happy? Yes, great. So as you will see, the Russia sanctions are a vast and complex organism, hardly hanging together, but now I will basically talk about one small part of it, and that is the export controls, especially the export controls of goods, groups of goods and technologies that are important on the battlefield and for the Russian military industry. when when this disappeared and you become happy, I was unable to move the. There you go. Thank you. Technology is always a challenge, including in presentations. So first of all, why are we doing this? Not to expand too much, but it is just what Vlad was saying recently. Of course, the support Ukraine gets to fight for its freedom is important, but it's also important what Russia doesn't get. And these are the words of our colleague Alexandra Matvichuk. Alexandra is the head of the Center of Civil Liberties in Ukraine, and last year's one of the Nobel laureates of last year. And we share the opinion that the Russia sanctions at bottom are a human rights instrument. Okay, so why is that important? I think it has certain implications for all stakeholders, for the states and for the business communities around Europe. One thing is that as a human rights instrument, it has to have non-compliance with the Russia sanctions is detrimental to sanctions and as an institution as a whole. I think it is a growing tool internationally. You will see more of it, but it needs to have credibility. If it doesn't have that credibility, it's of course bad for human rights and international law, but it's also really, really bad for international security. So this report, it stems from basically an open sources investigation that has taken place over a year and a half now. And the report is also a joint effort from our side, Norwegian Helsinki Committee Human Rights Group, from a company in Norway called CoRisk, which is a specialist in country risk analysis and open source investigations. Vik Borrein, a Norwegian law firm leading in Norway and in Europe, basically, a specialist on sanctions. And Ruud Pedersen, which is a European business consultancy group specializing on public affairs. The report is extensive. I will not go to all of it, but basically what I'm going to present to you here today are numbers, are facts that show how that there is basically not a consistent compliance culture with regard to the export controls in Europe, and they are based mainly on two types of sources. Trade data that are open source available to everyone, and customs data that are commercially available to a number of them. And using these two types of sources, you can see the macro picture of the trade flows and the response to the sanctions that have been imposed on Russia. And using the customs data, you can also get a micro view. That is, you can go into the individual trades on sanctioned commodities, and you can find who exported them, where the goods were produced, by what companies, and how basically the route they took into Russia. There are certain limitations into this work. I think that the numbers I will show you, they show criminal activity. But on the other hand, violations of sanctions laws. But on the other hand, I'm not going to stand here and accuse any particular company of any crime. The evidence we have is still not a complete picture. It is the import data of the Russian Federation, and as such, not the complete picture. So anyway, the aim of our report is basically just very simple, to try to expose the holes in the sanctions net and try to come up with ways to fix them. And this report is part of an advocacy effort of the Helsinki Committee and Korisk, and we've been working on the legislative and government level, on the media level, also with enforcement authorities, police, security police in some jurisdictions, and we are working with the business communities, and that's why I was very happy to come here today. With both on the media and on the government side, Germany has been a special focus. And if you see the illustration, that is a investigation by the Frankfurter Allgemeine based on our data, basically. And it's a very interesting case, and I think it shows you the problem. It regards and it starts out describing an attack on Uman that left about 20 Ukrainian civilians dead, and in the missile that was responsible for this probably a war crime, there were chips and from a German company called Infineon, which is one of the leading producers of semiconductors in the world. And the CEO of Infineon in this piece, he admits to the fact and he regrets this. And he says that, of course, we're trying to make sure that this doesn't happen. It has happened, but we could not really do anything more with regard to due diligence because there are so many chains in the chain of delivery intermediaries before this reached Russia. And the German customs authorities, the enforcement body in Germany, then says, yes, we do not expect the Infineon to use the type of tools that we, I mean, the Helsinki Committee and Korisk were using to get to establish this fact. Not basically, they said you don't have to use the customs databases that are commercially available, and we understand your argument that it is too hard to make due diligence on certain types of electronics because the delivery chains are so long. And as I conclude here, in my view, this is a declaration of surrender by the German enforcement authorities. Right, not to waste too much time, I think I will skip this part only, but briefly mention why is it important that sanctions are emerging as a human rights instrument. I think it is important, especially for the business communities, in that violating sanctions, of course, you run a risk of being criminally liable to national sanction laws, but you also risk being liable for complicity in very serious international crimes that are kind of intrinsic to the Russian military operations in Ukraine. Aggression, crimes against humanity, war crimes for sure, maybe even genocide. And complicity in these type of crimes, there are no statute of limitations for this. In US, as we speak, there are still class suits going on dating back to the apartheid era for sanction violations. So I think that to have a stronger compliance culture, business is really crucial, and they have to, I think, understand the risks and consequences associated with violating sanctions. Right. So now over to numbers, facts, I guess. And as I said earlier, the first set of figures that I'm going to show now are based on open source available trade data. But it's, I have to say, quite a painstaking work. So I don't think that there are too many other actors such as us who have these specific types of numbers. The second part of the data I will show you are based on customs data and give a more specific view on types of war critical goods that continue to be exported from the sanctioned coalition, from the West, and to Russia. Anyway, so one feature, and you will know about this, of course, is that the trade to Russia has been rerouted, and especially through some of the neighboring countries. What you see here is starting from the left. It's the normal export, Western exports to some 9 neighbors. Those are 4 members of the Eurasian Economic Union, who are in a trade community with Russia and Turkey and some others. And then you see the abrupt growth after the start of the full-scale invasion. That is what we believe is that is definitely the excessive trade, but probably all of this goes to Russia, we would think, at least a very large chunk of it. What you see at the end is a little bit worrying, and that is that from July until September, there has been a growth in this excessive trade. So although for all the measures that's been taken, it appears not to be in a decline, this excessive trade to Russia's neighbors. On the other hand, the total Western exports to Russia have, of course, declined. And here you see a trend that is definitely falling. Same here, you have the baseline from the 3 years before the full-scale invasion, and then the sudden drop at the start of the war, the slight resurgence when the rules of the new regime were kind of being established, and Western businesses learned to live with what was possible, what was not. And superimposed on that, you see the figure from before, the excessive exports to Russia's neighbor that we believe is going to Russia. So these are things that really have an effect, and well, you can see the extent of it here. This is the collected trade from March 2022 to September 2023, and the excess here is more than 22 billion euro. You can also see who are the main exporters. Of course, Germany, and you'll be surprised to see Lithuania there, but it's not that Lithuania is actually producing these goods that are being indirectly shipped to Russia, but Lithuania has traditionally been the export hub into the Soviet Union and still continues. The routes to Minsk and to Moscow go from there, so that's why they are very high on the list. But just small. I don't want to bash Lithuania too much, although the figures look like this. It should also be said that there are certain shadow experts that also go through other that also come from other exporters such as Taiwan, Australia, and Switzerland, and some others. So where do the goods go through? Again, I don't think that this is a surprise to any of you. Kazakhstan is really, really, really important, continues to be so, and Turkey too. But we have maybe down calibrated a little bit better with regard to Turkey. There are a lot of Western exports that seem to vanish when they go into Turkey, but they might go to other places under sanctions, such as Syria, Iran, and some others. But for the Russian trade, well, I can share this later. But this is how we have calibrated it by looking at the different exports. Yes. So anyway, you also see that Kazakhstan, Georgia, Kyrgyzstan, and Belarus, all of those countries, that is 4 of the 6 most important countries here, they are in a customs union with Russia. And this is something one might think about with regard to how to stop this. I'll come back to that later. Okay, so the war critical goods, just to give you an idea about what they are. Trucks can be used to many things, but they are really essential to the Russian campaign in Ukraine, given the vast nature of the battlefields and the need to bring in supplies and so on. Of course, communication, digital components, drones, of course, you all know that. Ball bearings, really essential. It seems that Russia is unable to produce them of high quality themselves. Navigation technology, avionics, and of course, everything regarding with optics, sights, and cameras, and so on. These are what we're talking about when we're talking about the war critical goods. There is a list produced by Japan, United States, UK, and EU. Critical items list, they call it. And if you go through that, you will find that still, even though that's a critical list, not that the Russians really shouldn't have, 27 out of those 40 goods are still being supplied by sanction coalition members. And we put in some other important goods there as well, also being shipped from the West to Russia. All right, so this is for the good news. we hope this is the good news. Here you see of the war-relevant goods based on customs data, what the Russians are getting from the West. And the red stuff is from the critical list of the EU and the others that I mentioned previously. And it is in decline. It appears that it's going down. We've made certain markers here, and this is for the various sanction regimes coming into force from the side of the EU. And of course, at the stage of March this year, all this stuff is sanctioned. So the number, of course, should be 0 here. None of this should reach Russia. That is not happening, but at least there is a decline with regard to some of the most war critical goods. Trucks, on the other hand, there is an increase. That's also interesting since we are in Sweden. Some of those trucks, quite a few of them, are Swedish trucks, actually, from the big Swedish producers. One of the reasons this trucks there are more of them being exported is also one of the peculiarities about the sanction regimes, that Belarus is sanctioned in a different way than Russia. So trucks can basically enter Russia from Belarus. So here you see again that with regard to the war relevant goods, war critical goods, there is the slow decrease of the West. China, on the other hand, is ramping up exports. And so we are asking this question then, if there is a real decline now in war-relevant goods. It looks promising, but as I explained, or as I said in the beginning, the customs data from Russia are no longer available, at least not on the open market. At some point, I guess the Russians realized that it was a really, really bad idea to send all this information to the West, so they stopped selling it, or rather, they did sell, but they sold fake information. So they made the money, but the data are not reliable from August and September. But for us, it seems like there is a decline, and we really, really hope that is the case, of course. But still, it is not enough, naturally. With regard to some of the war-relevant groups, where are they made? Well, there is one column bigger than the others. Not to mention any names here, but this is why we have had a special focus on Germany. It's just the central. Um, um, this is where it happens, and it's of course natural because Germany always used to have a great big export to Russia. It was the, I guess, second biggest exporters to Russia for a long time. Here you also see some peculiarities in that on the customs forms, it appears that almost half of the goods are being shipped also from Europe. This would be in contravention of the sanctions. This would be illegal. There might be some issues with how we interpret the forms here in that a lot of this stuff, it seems that the last place that they before they go to Russia are port in Hamburg or the airfield in Lithuania or in Helsinki. But there might be routes they are taking where the goods are in transit for a number of times before they actually reach Russia. So how this is going on is something we are trying to find out together with some of the customs authorities that we are in communication with. Right. Yeah. So the illustration here is another piece in Frankfurter Allgemeine, but it was also an Yle, Finnish broadcaster investigation. Again, based on our data, and shows that a Russian, a Finnish manufacturer, or rather a sales company called HD Heavy Duty, we're supplying a number of goods to Finland, from Finland to Russia, including a number of apparently items from Swedish companies. We don't know how they were able to do this, but Finnish customs authorities have kind of said that it might be tampering with the export forms. Basically, that they said they were selling something different, not sanctioned. But if we look at how enforcement regimes and enforcement practices are in Europe and align them with the facts that we have about who has the bigger leaks in trade and sanctioned goods to Russia, we see that UK is really, really small compared to the size of the economy. And we think that there is a connection in that they really do have a strong enforcement, both on the legislative side, but also in the practical side. So if you want to look someplace, you probably should look to the UK. But again, it's very hard to make anything but tentative conclusions, since all the European jurisdictions are very hesitant about sharing real information about enforcement. Right now in the EU, there are a couple of things happening that will be really important to try to change this picture and try to um, um, make a stronger compliance culture. One is of course, the 12th sanctions package that I guess Vlad will go down and discuss in Brussels tomorrow. Another thing is a proposed EU directive, which is trying to harmonize enforcement regimes and criminal definitions with regard to violating union restrictive measures. That is also including the export controls, naturally. And this has been a really long and hard process in the EU. It's not the first time it is like that, I guess. Or how would I know, since I'm from Norway, not we're not a member of the European Union, of course. But a couple of the sticking points here, they concern just what we've been looking at. On the definition side, there is a battle going on for the circumvention. How far should it be classified as a criminal offense? Circumvention? Should it be just some of the restrictive measures of the union, or should it also be, for instance, the export controls? That is one key battle. The second one is regarding the negligence provision. Will the company be criminally liable, not only if they have exported, but they didn't know about it? But I mean, the Negligence Institute basically says that you are liable if you should have known about it. That is very, you need to do your due diligence. So that is the second sticking point in these negotiations, and they just broke down. So negotiations on this directive will continue in January, and I really hope that Sweden will be one of the progressive parties in this, of course. Yes, we have a number of other recommendations. I'm not going to go through that whole list. You will find them in our report that I can share. But just one thing I would mention, since I'm here at the Stockholm School of Economics, and it's this title here, the Create Incentives. What I think here is that there will be a huge amount of funds being channeled to Ukraine for the so-called reconstruction and for rebuilding. And there will be huge tenders. The Norwegian government, for instance, they have promised several billion euros over a period of years, and well, there will be huge contracts. I think that one of the conditions for participating in the Ukrainian government's tenders in this should be that you have a clean record with regard to the sanction violations. And I think that this would be a great measure also for fair competition. Because what I was showing you is also a problem for competition in business around Europe, in that some companies are complying with sanctions and paying a price for that, whereas others are treating them basically as a business opportunity and gaining market shares. And this is really problematic, of course. So I think that one thing is that for the Ukraine tenders, that these companies who have violated sanctions, they should not be able to participate. Yes, that was all. I'll just finish with this tantalizing little picture from our customs database that show that one of the companies with quite a high export to the Russian Federation of sanctioned goods, it's a company you might have heard about, Volvo Lastvagnar. I'm not going to go into that, but this is part of a story that the Norwegian paper Aftenposten is working on. There are some Swedish companies in that story, but the basic focus is on the role of the Norwegian sovereign wealth fund, the oil fund, world's biggest investor, with regard to sanctions. And we, of course, believe that they should have a much more progressive role on sanctions. Thank you.